Lola and Molly hit the Happy Hills entrance at full speed, their sneakers kicking up a trail of fine gray gravel. They did not slow down. They wove through the crowded turnstiles, pushing past the metal bars as Nina, Holly, and Fiona scrambled to keep pace right behind them. The air grew thick with the scent of popcorn and the rhythmic, tinny melody of the carousel. Nina surged ahead, arm extended, pointing toward the center of the park, where the ride spun in a constant, colorful blur. The girls did not wait for instructions. They abandoned the path and dashed across the grass. Lola reached the platform first, vaulting onto a brightly painted horse, while Molly lunged for the mount right next to her. Nina, Holly, and Fiona scrambled to claim their own seats as the operator engaged the gears. The floor beneath them groaned, then shuddered into motion. The ride began to pick up speed, pulling the world into a spinning ring of light. They gripped the brass poles, the centrifugal force leaning their bodies outward, and let out a collective shout as the landscape dissolved into a streak of motion. The carousel slowed to a crawl, and the girls jumped from the platform before it fully stopped, their momentum carrying them toward the next attraction. They sprinted across the pavement, boots thudding against the asphalt as they reached the fenced-in bumper car arena. They scrambled into the low-slung vehicles, hands gripping the steering wheels, feet finding the pedals. Molly did not wait for the starting signal. She jammed her foot against the pedal, the motor whining as her car surged forward. She cut a sharp arc across the floor, aiming directly for Fiona. The impact was absolute. A violent metallic thud echoed through the arena as the two cars locked together, jolting the frames and rattling the floorboards. The sudden stop threw them forward against their restraints. For a heartbeat, there was only the smell of ozone and burnt rubber. Then, the silence broke. High-pitched shrieks of laughter erupted from both cars. They pushed off each other, spinning in wild, uncoordinated circles. The arena transformed into a blur of motion, with every girl hunting a target, slamming into the bumpers, and swerving to avoid the next impact. They drove with reckless intent, turning the simple game into a chaotic dance of crashes and uncontrolled joy. The girls abandoned the bumper car arena, their breath coming in short, ragged bursts of lingering laughter. They jogged toward the entrance of the funhouse, ducking under a neon sign that pulsed with rhythmic light. Inside, the air grew cool and smelled of polished wood and stale dust. They moved through a series of narrow, winding corridors, their footsteps echoing against the floorboards. Nina stopped abruptly in front of a wide, curved mirror that shimmered with an uneven surface. She planted her feet firmly, looked at her reflection, and began to wave her arms in wide, sweeping arcs. In the glass, her limbs stretched and snapped, warping into thin, jagged shapes that seemed to defy the geometry of the room. She twisted her torso, and the reflection rippled like water, turning her into a tall, spindly figure that swayed in time with her movements. She pointed at the distorted glass, her eyes wide with amusement. The other girls crowded around her, pushing in to get a better view. As they saw their own reflections stretching and compressing against the glass, the narrow room filled with a sudden, sharp wave of cheers. They leaned into the mirrors, waving, jumping, and contorting their bodies to see who could create the most ridiculous shape, their joy bouncing off the walls and turning the simple hall of mirrors into a center of shared hilarity. The laughter from the mirrors faded as they stepped out into the humid afternoon air. Ahead, the rhythmic clanking of the log flume conveyor belt drew them forward. They hurried to the loading dock and climbed into a wooden boat, their weight settling the vessel deep into the water. The chain caught the hull with a heavy, metallic rattle. They began the long, slow climb toward the sky. The park below shrank, the sounds of the crowd becoming a low, indistinct hum. At the summit, the boat hung for a heartbeat, tilted against the horizon, before gravity seized it. They plummeted. The wind roared in their ears, stripping away the heat of the day. The nose of the boat buried itself into the pool at the bottom, and a massive wall of water erupted, arching over the sides. The icy spray hit them like a physical blow, soaking through skin and leaving them gasping. They emerged from the mist, blinking through the droplets, their hair plastered to their foreheads and water pooling in the footwell. They stood up in the boat, dripping and shivering, their breath hitching in a mix of shock and exhilaration. They shoved the vessel toward the dock, clambering out onto the wet planks with shaky legs, thoroughly drenched but fully awake to the thrill of the ride. With the adrenaline of the flume still vibrating in their limbs, the girls raced toward the row of shaded picnic benches. They collapsed onto the wooden seats, their wet shoes leaving dark prints on the pavement. Boxes of pizza were torn open, and the scent of melted cheese and tomato sauce filled the air. They didn't bother with napkins. They reached for slices with dripping hands, tearing into the crusts while laughing over the day's events. Next came the cotton candy, great clouds of spun sugar that dissolved instantly upon their tongues. They pulled at the sticky tufts, passing the cones back and forth until their fingers were coated in a tacky, crystalline glaze. Fiona hauled her camera out from her bag, framing the group as they leaned in close. She snapped a rapid sequence of photos, catching the messy joy of the moment: sugar-dusted cheeks, bright eyes, and wide, uninhibited smiles. They didn't worry about the mess or the dripping remnants of the meal. They simply sat together, surrounded by the discarded boxes and the fading sweetness of the afternoon, their faces smeared with sugar as they posed for the lens, freezing the chaotic, perfect friendship of the day into a series of frames. They wiped their sticky hands on the grass and headed toward the towering silhouette of the Ferris wheel. The ride operator gestured for them to step forward. They crammed into the metal cabin, their shoulders pressing together as the bench groaned under their collective weight. A sharp jolt vibrated through the floorboards as the wheel engaged. They pulled upward, the ride moving with a slow, rhythmic clanking that echoed against the evening sky. Outside the open frame, the park began to shrink. The bustling crowds turned into tiny, moving dots, and the noise of the carnival faded into a distant, muffled hum. As they reached the highest point of the rotation, the car swayed gently in the breeze. The girls fell silent, gripping the safety bar as they stared down. The entire park had transformed into a glowing map of neon lines and spinning lights, a miniature world laid out in vibrant color beneath their feet. They did not speak, they simply watched the horizon stretch out to meet the dark edge of the park. The ground felt impossibly far away, replaced by a vast, open expanse of air and light. For a long, suspended moment, the chaos of the afternoon vanished, leaving only the steady, circular motion of the ride and the quiet wonder of the view. Their feet hit the solid pavement, and the quiet awe of the high altitude vanished in an instant. They pivoted toward the neon-lit game stalls, drawn by the sharp, rhythmic clatter of rings and the occasional pop of air guns. Holly led the charge, her eyes locked on the prize rack. She gripped a handful of rings, stepped to the barrier, and tossed with a flick of her wrist. The plastic ring spiraled through the air and caught the neck of a plush tiger. A cheer erupted as the attendant unhooked the prize and tossed it into her arms. Fiona didn't wait. She shouldered up to the next station, eyes narrowing as she took aim with the dart gun. She squeezed the trigger, and the sharp snap of a bursting balloon cut through the music. She spun around, face flushed with the sudden thrill of victory, holding a bright green frog high above her head. Molly jumped in, hitting the target on her first try to claim a blue dolphin. The momentum was infectious now. They moved like a wave from one booth to the next, trading tips and shouting encouragement. Every hit brought a fresh spike of energy, turning the lane into a blur of motion, skill, and mounting, competitive intensity. The group slowed their pace, clustering around the final booth at the end of the row. This was the one that had eluded them all afternoon. Lola stepped forward, pushing through the small crowd until she stood directly before the heavy iron handle of the main game. She wiped her palms on her sides, taking a breath that steadied her entire frame. The laughter from the other girls died down, replaced by a sudden, expectant stillness. Lola reached out, her fingers tightening around the cold, grooved metal of the lever. She did not look at the prizes or the surrounding lights. She stared only at the mechanism. With a sharp, decisive movement, she pulled. The handle resisted for a fraction of a second, then gave way with a metallic groan. A clear, piercing bell rang out across the entire midway, vibrating through the floorboards. The sound hung in the air for a heartbeat before the girls erupted. They swarmed her, shouting and jumping as the attendant reached for the top-tier prize. It was the moment they had been waiting for, a peak of pure, unfiltered success that silenced the background music and brought the entire row to a complete, breathless standstill. The attendant hauled the massive pink teddy bear off the top shelf and dropped it onto the counter with a heavy thud. Lola stepped forward, wrapping her arms around the prize, but it was too tall to carry. She gripped one of its soft, oversized arms and hauled it toward the edge of the stall. As it hit the pavement, the bear dragged, its plush fur collecting dust from the path. The weight of the bear was undeniable, a physical testament to the effort they had poured into the day. Lola took the lead, tugging the prize along, while the others flanked her like an honor guard, their own prizes tucked under their arms. Above them, the sky had begun to shift, the blue fading into a deep, burnt orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. The long shadows of the girls and the giant bear stretched out before them, trailing across the gravel. They walked with a heavy, satisfied rhythm, the sound of the bear's friction against the ground marking their progress. Every step felt lighter despite the bulk of the bear, their voices low and steady, anchored by the sheer size of the victory they were carrying home. The sun vanished, and the park transformed. Overhead, strings of bulbs flickered, then buzzed to life, bathing the gravel path in electric hues of violet and electric blue. The girls kept moving, their pace slowing as the exit gate drew near. Lola still clutched the arm of her prize, the bear moving with a rhythmic scrape against the ground. Their shadows grew long and distorted, dancing over the patches of light cast by the neon signs. The air had cooled, carrying the scent of spent sugar and cooling metal. They reached the turnstiles, the iron bars cold and unmoving. As one, they stopped. The park behind them was a landscape of spinning lights and distant, fading music. They stood in the stillness, the hum of the rides vibrating through the soles of their feet. Fiona shifted her grip on the small frog, and Nina leaned against the gatepost. No one spoke. They looked back at the glowing carousel, a final snapshot of the day burned into their minds. Then, the silence broke. They turned away from the light, pushed through the exit, and stepped together into the cool dark of the night.